In Alabama, if you're stopped for a DUI, can you refuse the field sobriety tests? The answer is yes, you can. Let's talk about this a little bit. First off, if you're stopped and the police officer suspects that you have committed the crime of driving under the influence, he's going to direct you to take field sobriety tests. The fact that he's directing you, he's going to say, I need you to take these tests, that doesn't mean that you have to do it. You have an absolute right to refuse these tests. Now, the tests that they're probably going to ask you to take are at least 3 tests, one of which is called the one-leg stand. And that's you're going to stand and balance on one leg and count. The next test is the walk and turn. Typically, you're walking an imaginary line, and you're supposed to walk heel to toe to keep your foot on the imaginary line. Sometimes it's a real line, but often it's imaginary. Of course, I'm always wondering, well, is the line that the person's imagining in their head the same one that the cop's imagining? But that's a different issue. The other test is something called the HGN, and that's called the horizontal gaze nystagmus test. And basically, a police officer will hold up a pen and ask you to track it with your eyes. He's trying to see if your eyes vibrate when you're looking to help him determine whether or not he thinks you're under the influence of alcohol or some controlled substance. There are other tests that sometimes police officers will administer. One of them is called the finger to nose, and the other one is backwards counting, 5, 4, 3, 2, whatever. So those are some of the tests they'll ask you, but you can refuse, and if you refuse, that's that much evidence or less evidence that the police officer has against you. It doesn't mean you're not going to get arrested for DUI. He can go back to the old days and say, well, he smelled like a brewery, his eyes were bloodshot and glassy, his speech was slurred and all of that. That may or may not be enough. It's also, there's typically going to be a video nowadays, so if you're staggering around and singing How Dry I Am, even without the field sobriety tests, you've got a more difficult case. So you can refuse those tests. Now, there's other tests, and those are the breath tests, and there's 2 types. One of them is a small handheld machine, maybe about the size of a cigarette pack or a large cell phone, and that's called the preliminary breath testing device. You can refuse that. If you refuse that, that means the officer doesn't have any idea as to what percentage, if any, of alcohol in your blood. Also, if you don't have alcohol, it hasn't exonerated you either. I haven't been drinking, I promise, but that doesn't exonerate you either. However, the tests of the preliminary breath test, the handheld field sobriety test, or breath test, are typically not admissible in court. Now, there's another test that you may be asked to take, and that's a larger machine, maybe the size of a VCR. They use different machines, but typically it's something called the Draeger. Now, you can refuse that test as well. However, it can have consequences for refusing that test. It can lead to the potential administrative suspension of your driver's license, and depending on what your breath test is on the Draeger, that may be admissible in court against you. So if your blood alcohol content is above the legal limit in Alabama, then yeah, that could have negative consequences, and it could lead also to a suspension because you're over the legal limit and as a consequence of the DUI, not as the consequence of refusing the test if you haven't refused it. Now, I think that I can say safely that there are some wonder workers as far as lawyers in the area of DUI. And if you're charged with a DUI, you want to talk to the best, most competent lawyer you can about this, because there's cases that you might think, oh, I can't win, there's no way, and a lawyer may see something that you don't. If you're charged with a DUI and you'd like to talk to me, just give me a call. The phone number's below. I'm attorney Andy Siegel. I hope you found this video to be a bit informative and helpful. Thanks for watching, and if you want to be nice, give us the old thumbs up thing, and thanks again.